Chapter 1691 Uninvited Guests. Newton's first law was a very strange ability. It didn't have any offensive properties, and its only function was to make the mutant's ability appear unstable for a brief moment. But as long as it was utilized properly, it could play an extremely crucial role. For example, right now, when the Mind Ray and Everything Penetrates abilities attacked Blood Tide and Nien's ability Shield in unison, Newton directly unleashed the first law's ability. He had grasped this timing very well. Both sides had already received considerable damage during the previous battle, and the direct consumption of power had also reached a certain point. So at this time, both sides were taut strings. And at such a time, disrupting the release of the other party's supernatural power directly caused Blood Tide and Nien's ability barrier to become less stable. Boom! The Mind Ray directly penetrated Blood Tide and Nien's ability barrier, and the dazzling golden light directly blasted onto their bodies. Amidst the golden light, the armor on the duo's bodies instantly turned into shreds, and their entire bodies were exposed to Deng Shintong's heavenly Dao star. It was as if a human had fallen into the crater of a volcano. Having not seen the sun for countless years, there was simply no factor present in their bodies that could adapt to strong ultraviolet rays. Adding to the fact that they were hit at this time, the weakness of their bodies coupled with the double lack of adaptation to the external environment caused them to be directly seriously injured. The blood on Newton's face hadn't dried up yet, and the light of the atheist in his hand had become dimmed. He lowered his head and suddenly covered his mouth and coughed loudly, a few strands of thick blood flowing out along his fingers. Not far away, Canelo glanced at him, but did not step forward. The attack that Blood Tide had unleashed earlier, the damage was heavier than imagined, directly harming their internal organs and even nearly causing their hearts to split open. The ones who had held on strongly until now were also close to reaching their limits. Blood Tide and Nien crashed to the earth. Nien used his last ounce of strength to support the two of them, otherwise, falling from a height of hundreds of meters, even a level Epsilon mutant would be broken alive into mush. Nien stared cautiously at Newton and Canelo in the distance, and then glanced at the heavily injured Blood Tide. He gave a bitter laugh. I prepared precisely for this moment, didn't I? Blood Tide's long river of blood had dried up in the midst of the non-stop fighting that was the source of his power, and at this moment, he was incomparably weak. Nien's state was no better. However, he knew that at this time, the other two still both had the power to fight, while if they relied solely on him, and in the midst of the environment that was subjected to the heavenly Dao star's exposure, the two of them would surely die. Use my blood. Nien suddenly opened his mouth and said. He raised his right hand, merged his fingers into a sword, and then without the slightest hesitation, he slashed the aorta of his left arm. Blood Tide also did not hesitate and directly stripped the blood from his body. The blood of a white chariot-level mutant contained a powerful life origin, and Blood Tide's eyes were filled with a vicious look as he unexpectedly disregarded Nien's life, and in one gulp, he drained the blood from his body until it dried up. In less than a second's time, Nien was directly drained to become a dried-up corpse. And the Blood Tide who had gained power stood up once again, and he had more power in his body to continue fighting. Damn guy, so hard to kill. Newton lowered his left hand, his palm filled with blood, as he and Canelo stared cautiously ahead. The next battle was probably a real life and death decision. Even if they were able to win, but there was a high probability that they themselves would have to be buried with them. Roar! The Blood Tide who killed the vice-general's eyes were red, letting out a furious roar, the wind whistling on the entire battlefield. This time, he was really planning to fight for his life with the two humans in front of him. At this time, the three people have already spent a lot of energy, physical condition is not good, continue to fight is nothing more than a fish death net broken end. Canelo and Newton also had cold faces, making preparations for the final battle. However, right at this time, Blood Tide's immediate radiance suddenly changed. Everything seemed to slow down in the space in front of him. Blood Tide raised his head in bewilderment, and at this moment, his mental power had also almost reached its limit. He was surprised to see that in the sky, the falling snowflakes were slowly descending at an almost static speed. Looking ahead again, Newton and Canello had surprisingly gone nowhere. This is an illusion? Blood Tide immediately understood what had happened, and his heart shook tremendously. The Allied forces had already deployed 3 Epsilon-level mutants in order to deal with them. Could it be that there was a 4th? But they had 4 silver armor generals leading them on this trip, plus the Hades gatekeeper himself, so it was impossible for the Allied forces to still have reservations. Where did this newly appeared mutant come from? Not only him, even Newton and Canello were stupefied at this moment. The scene in front of them was the same as the Blood Tide. They could only see falling snow in the sky in a near-stagnant state, and could not see any other scene. Even the Blood Tide had disappeared from their sight. What happened? Could it be that a new mutant has appeared? It's not clear. It's not known whether the person coming is a friend or foe, so be careful and be on guard. The duo leaned their backs against each other and began to be on full alert to avoid being attacked by the enemy that suddenly appeared. And at this moment, in the middle of Blood Tide's vision, from the distant snow, a figure stepped over the soft snow and slowly walked towards him step by step. It was a petite figure with a white cloak, and it was almost difficult to see the shadow clearly in the middle of the snow. Blood Tide opened his mouth and let out a roar, then forced out a line of blood from within his palm, turning into a blood arrow that streaked towards the front. The blood arrow pierced through the shadow, but it ended up falling short. Everything was an illusion. Suddenly, Blood Tide felt a burning sensation envelop his entire body, and when he looked down, his skin was actually burning. He couldn't distinguish clearly whether it was an illusion or real, only that in the sky above his head, the intense light made it almost impossible for him to see the entire world clearly. It was a huge sun, bursting out with blinding white light, completely coloring the entire world into a blazing yellowish white. Blood Tide's body burned as an angry roar escaped his mouth. "This is all a lie. Don't you dare try to deceive me." He knew that this was an illusion because everything was too far out of the ordinary. Even though his nerves felt the pain, he knew that his body was not harmed. As long as his willpower was strong enough to firmly believe that he was not injured, he would soon be able to break through this illusion. By then, that illusionist hiding in the shadows would definitely be killed by him. Pfft! Just as he was holding this thought, a sharp pain suddenly came from his chest. He couldn't see anything, so he could only reach out and touch it, and surprisingly, he felt a large hole in his chest that could be stuffed with his entire fist. Blood flowed out in rivulets, stretching out like a stream. "This is all fake," Blood Tide muttered. Chapter 1692 Abilities in Full Swing. Above the main battlefield, Zhang Yi and the others could be said to have fought with all their might, and had finally pierced through the Hades gatekeeper's armor. But the continued battle had made them realize the huge gap in strength between themselves and the Hades gatekeeper. It was simply not on the same level. Zhang Yi had only attempted one attack against the Hades gatekeeper, and that was to use Divine Realm Netherworld cleansing to attack his armor. However, so far, he, whose supernatural ability index was already as high as 28,000 points, was unable to make the Hades gatekeeper shed even a single drop of blood. Instead, it had only caused his armor to shatter a little. So now, he had completely given up on attacks initiated by himself, and instead decided to use his abilities to cooperate with the allies around him. Stall the Hades gatekeeper and wait for the results of the investigation to be given from the region's side. Or try to match Li Changgong's ability to make the Hades gatekeeper shed a drop of blood. Rumble. The ghost train traveled swiftly through the void. Of Heavenly Jet Star Daishing kept unleashing his abilities. He wouldn't let the ghost train stay in one place for much longer. Because with the strength of the Hades gatekeeper, he might be able to quickly determine the ghost train's location. The Hades gatekeeper had completely lost his patience at this point. He was so powerful that the longer he stayed in this world, the greater the risk would be. Therefore, he began to increase the strength of his output. He opened his hands, and one after another star of destruction blasted out furiously in all directions with him at the center. The energy attack that was enough to easily obliterate an epsilon-level mutant was only on the level of an ordinary attack to him. He seemed to have endless energy in his body, and there was no need to worry about energy depletion or the emptiness of his supernatural abilities due to the release of his abilities. This was the powerful existence of 40,000 points or more, the Black Bishop. Boom! 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 Tianhai City was not just flattened. It was simply blown into a huge basin. Dozens of huge depressions appear out of nowhere on top of the earth, and all the traces of civilization that remained in mankind went up in smoke. This fluctuation of energy finally made Zhang Yi and the others completely unable to sit still. This was because according to this indiscriminate attacking style of the Hades gatekeeper, he would soon be able to directly obliterate the 36 heavenly spirits that had set up a formation around Tianhai City with his hard power. Once the hypnosis was broken, their home field advantage would be greatly diminished at that time. Leaving the Hades gatekeeper in Tianhai City was the only possibility for them to win. Strike! Ghost Train appeared near the Hades gatekeeper once again, this time behind him. However, the brief moment they appeared, the moment they caused some slight movement in the area, the Hades gatekeeper's figure unexpectedly approached directly like a ghost. Because the speed was too fast, it resulted in leaving an overlapping residual shadow above Zhang Yi and the others' retinas. The train did not even fully emerge from the void before the Hades gatekeeper's fist that dominated the heavens and the earth smashed over at all of them without any whistling. A fist of black light emerged from his fist, and as the Hades gatekeeper's fist blasted out, it exploded directly in front of Zhang Yi and the others. Zhang Yi and the others met the Hades gatekeeper's eyes. What kind of eyes were those? The kind of cold and desperate eyes that did not even allow one to see the slightest bit of killing intent. It was a kind of indifference of the superior to the humble, as if it was a towering god who wanted to suppress disobedient humans, or the kind of emotion one would feel when facing a nasty bug and wanting to quickly crush it to death. Ability full power. Although Zhang Yi was inwardly shocked beyond belief, he had already made full preparations the moment he decided to show up and stall for time. The sword in the tree's net, the dimensional gate of the 3,000 realms, and the weakening of the time and space reverse flows ability all erupted in an instant. Not only him, Shang Daowen, Li Changgong and Alexei also exploded their most powerful energies in an instant. Their aim was not to attack, but to block the strike of the Hades gatekeeper at this moment. They could clearly sense that the Hades gatekeeper had lost patience with them and had enhanced the power of his strike. Boo! Black light exploded directly from the Hades gatekeeper's fist, transforming into a huge translucent sphere of energy that directly enveloped the ghost train in front of them completely. The incomparably terrifying energy began to devour everything within the confines of the Star of Destruction indiscriminately. I am Heaven's will. Break it for me! Li Changgong roared, desperately drawing his sword and using his ability to erase all the power that was attacking towards them. Alexei wielded his two huge battle axes, endless thunder surging madly behind him as thunder dragons roared, draping around Ghost Train's perimeter. Their defenses were broken in just an instant, and the layers and layers of defenses all struggled to block this all-out strike from the Hades gatekeeper. At the critical moment, Ho-Tu in the middle of the carriage struck again. Hades gatekeeper's close bombardment also precisely allowed him to fall within Ho-Tu's 6 paths of reincarnation domain. Hungry Ghost Path. With the ghost train as the center, the surroundings suddenly turned into a huge dark area, and a vortex violently emerged from above the train. The Hades gatekeeper could only feel his power suddenly begin to drain away, as if something had hardened and stripped his power from within his body. Along with that, the power of his attacks were greatly weakened. Instinctively, the Hades gatekeeper quickly dodged and withdrew a sufficient distance. Although such a tactic was unable to inflict effective damage on him, his strong battle sense still allowed him to quickly disengage from the unfavorable environment against him. It took the combined efforts of 5 people to block the full force of the Hades gatekeeper's strike. And at this time, Zhang Yi and the others' backs were already dripping with sweat. Among Li Changdong's eyes, that always arrogant look had also completely disappeared. An emotion of despair gradually appeared in his heart. Such an opponent, how in the world was he going to fight? The strength was completely not on the same level, and even after struggling so hard, he didn't harm the other party in the slightest. Not to mention stalling for time, even if they were lucky enough not to die, it would already require them to fight with all their might. Only Alexei was still roaring, his hands gripping the huge battle axe tightly, his eyes filled with battle intent. Zhang Yi's eyes were gloomy as he looked at the black shadow that was like a demonic god not far away, and he didn't know what means to use to win. His most powerful star-piercing cannon and divine realm netherworld cleansing were unable to injure the opponent's body in the slightest. The many undercards he was proud of, including Yang Xinxin, were all difficult to use at this time. After all, he was unable to hypnosis the other party for even a millisecond. I no longer have time to waste with you guys. The Hades gatekeeper had already seen through the strength of this group of surface humans, and the last scruples and caution in his heart completely disappeared. If this is all you guys have, then it's time for everything to end. Chapter 1693 Void Destiny. As the Hades gatekeeper was the great general of the Wuluan Empire, he possessed an extremely powerful battle mindset. From the very beginning, he hadn't used his full strength either, not just out of fear of the mysterious rules of the underworld. More importantly, in a battle between mutants, even if there was a certain strength gap, it could be overturned due to the characteristics of their abilities. So in the 5 minutes time from the start of the battle until now, he had always maintained a cautious and restrained attitude, not going all out with his firepower, and even made a certain defensive stance. Now, however, he had thoroughly mapped out the strength of all 5 people in front of him. The only one that posed so much of a threat to him was only that mutant with the sword. But that kind of incredibly slow attack, he could dodge it with his eyes closed. The Hades gatekeeper raised his hands to his chest. It's time to end this boring farce. A contemptuous smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. These guys, they couldn't really think that this kind of clumsy maze could hypnosis him, could they? His hands were facing each other, and black supernatural energy began to converge within his palms. It was a black sphere of energy that contained a suffocating power, and even from a distance, Zhang Yi and the others could already feel the wariness. The black, near-substantial power unexpectedly began to slowly merge before turning into an even more gigantic ball of energy. What is he going to do? Li Changdong said nervously. Extinction? No, Zhang Yi frowned. We have the shelter of the ghost train, so there's no point in him making a secondary attack on us. Unless he has already thought of a way to capture our position. And what exactly was the best means of attack in the face of this ability to infinitely travel through the void without being able to determine its location? The Hades gatekeeper gave his answer. That incomparably powerful force finished coalescing within his palms, turning into a soccer ball-sized pure black sphere, as if the surrounding light was able to be swallowed into it. Zhang Yi's few people just looked at it, and their souls were almost swallowed by the fear within them. The Hades gatekeeper glanced at them indifferently, and then his hands suddenly turned into claw-like forms and ruthlessly slapped on top of that sphere of energy. Void Destiny. With the Hades gatekeeper as the center, a vast force suddenly swept towards Hexagon, spreading out instantly in a manner that destroyed everything. That power brought an aura of death to Zhang Yi, and for the first time in his life, he felt that the threat of death was surprisingly so close to him. He exerted every ounce of strength he had, using all of his defensive means to the limit to defend against it. Then he yelled, "Dai Sheng!" Dai Sheng was also drenched in sweat at this time, and without hesitation, he unleashed his star cluster, ability to divert the entire ghost train. Boom! The force instantly swept across their bearing and continued to spread out in all directions with an unstoppable momentum. The power cascaded like a tsunami, sweeping through the center of Tianhai City and continuing to spread in all directions. Zhang Yi and his ghost train had just appeared in another corner of Tianhai City from the void, when this terrifying wave struck again. And at this moment, it was a full 50 kilometers away from the previous direction. Zhang Yi and the others turned pale with vigor. The power of this strike from the Hades gatekeeper was actually comparable to a medium equivalent Reaper of Love. Zhang Yi understood that Tianhai City was completely finished, but right now was not the time to lament such things, but rather, it was important to save their lives. Li Changgong's face turned pale, Shang Daowen and Ho Tua's eyes also appeared to be gloomy. Only Zhang Yi didn't say a word of nonsense. Between life and death, the light in his right eye flowed, unleashing his most powerful defense ability. Rumble! Rumble! The commotion in Tianhai City was so great that the mutants in the other battlefields in the distance were able to hear it clearly. Giant Blade Silver Armor's gaze couldn't help but look in the direction of Tianhai City, and he smiled with satisfaction. Then his gaze went to the opposite side of Black Emperor, Qin Xuanba. At this moment, the two sides had already experienced countless rounds of fierce battles. Also as enhancement mutants, their battles with each other were all close combat. However, their attacks and defenses were both very strong, so it was incredibly difficult for anyone to kill each other. Giant Blade said, "Feel this power? This is the strength of our Wuluan Empire's top existences. Inside your heart, have you despaired?" Qin Xuanba and Han Shanzu's faces were somewhat ugly. That power, even from a long distance away, they were able to feel it clearly. As Epsilon-level mutants, they certainly understood how powerful this force was, so powerful that it could wipe them out at will. Qin Xuanba pressed down the brim of his own hat, his gaze blazing like a military sword. "I believe in the comrades of the Allied forces. They can defend our motherland." He raised his fist towards Giant Blade, his right index finger arrogantly pointing at his head, "And my mission as a soldier is to destroy you here." Giant Blade laughed, as if he had heard some incomparably funny joke, letting out a loud laugh. "Ha ha ha! Stupid human, unwilling to accept reality because you are too desperate? Then, let me personally send you to face death." The Giant Blade, who already thought they had achieved victory at this point, doubled in confidence and, like a fighter jet, violently rushed towards Qin Xuanba. The same situation was happening at the same time on top of all the other battlefields. The killing was going on in an incomparably grueling manner, and no one had a way back to speak of. And Liang Yu and Flower were still on standby in the middle of the icy sky and snow. Flower's huge body was lying on the snowy ground, narrowing its eyes slightly as it felt that power erupting from Tianhai City, and a color of worry flashed in its eyes. However, considering Zhang Yi's strength, it blinked slowly. The master never needed it to worry. Perhaps Zhang Yi's strength was not the strongest, and he would always face enemies that were tougher than him, but he had never lost. Because, Zhang Yi would never put himself in a dangerous situation. This was something Flower deeply believed in. Liang Yu leaned against Flower's body and held Dragon's Roar in her arms with both hands. Today's Dragon's Roar was long gone from the Edelman metal weapon it was back then. After Liu Karen's many improvements, at this time, it was a terrifying killing weapon that was dark silver in color with a dragon pattern on its sword. After countless killings, it had drunk the blood of too many powerful people, and even at this point, Liang Yu was able to feel a certain resonance with it. Her entire body was in a meditative state, keeping her body and spirit at an optimal level. The time was coming. As a motorized force, they would join the battlefield at the moment when the battle was most intense. At that time, they would be the last straw that crushed the camel. Chapter 1694, The Forces That Are Watching from the Wall. The powerful energy fluctuations that erupted in Tianhai City drew the attention of various forces around the globe at this moment. Although many forces were not directly involved in this war at all, their eyes were fixed on the battlefield in Huashu Kingdom. Since the end of the world, mankind was directly confronted with an underground civilization, and the largest war had occurred above the surface. This battle would expose many problems. For example, the true strength of Huashu Kingdom. For example, how powerful the underground civilization really was again. These were all incredibly important information, so they would rather stay up most of the night to keep a close eye on the battle here. Of course, the opposite side of the planet was still daytime at this time. Countless satellites were relaying the battle situation here in real time, and they might not be able to clearly see everything that was happening on the battlefield, as these were not allowed by the Huashu Kingdom, Columbia and Fremon's triumvirate. But they only needed to survey the energy fluctuations of this place, and they could use that information to determine the basic battle situation. The terrifying energy that erupted in Tianhai City was comparable to a small to medium-sized reaper of love. Such power made the Pope of the Sovereign Pontiff, Alexander X, who was located in Vatican at this time, have a grave expression on his face. Those heretics of the underground world, have they even become this powerful? If they continue to invade, it might affect the Sovereign Pontiff's great plan. Alexander X's hawkish nose wrinkled, and a look of dissatisfaction surfaced on his crease-filled face. Behind him, Cardinal Arnold Olive held the Holy Scripture and respectfully said, "But now, it seems too late to support the past. The battle between the top mutants could be over soon." Even if they flew over from the back of the planet in the fastest airplane at this time, they were only afraid that it would no longer be of any use after arriving at the scene. It was even possible that they would hitch themselves up as well. Oh, that can't be helped. Originally, I just wanted to teach them a lesson as well, but I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Alexander X rubbed his brow, and suddenly, he smiled. However, I don't believe that a kingdom of Huashu Kingdom's level would be easily destruction. Located on a mysterious island in the middle of the ocean, at this time, a blizzard was raging outside the window, and inside the house, a roaring fire was burning under the fireplace. The president of the pupil organization, Montesquieu, was sitting on a chair with his legs resting on a thick blanket, listening to the report of his men. King's servant, Mildred Bratt, described the abnormal energy fluctuations in Tianhai City to him and expressed his concerns. Both Ho-Tu and Chaos are the targets of our examination, but the enemies they face in this battle are simply too powerful. It's even possible that they will both fall in this battle. Bratt carefully looked towards Montesquieu, hoping that this mentor could make a wise decision at this point. Shall we make a move?" Montesquieu lowered his head as he rubbed his rough fingers, perhaps because the air was a little dry due to the fireplace burning for too long. "No, now is not the time for us to strike. Once we expose ourselves to the sunlight, those lapdogs won't make it easy for us." A mocking smile appeared on his face, full of contempt for the lapdogs as he called them, but not seeing much worry. "However, if they really lose, then it will be a big blow to our sacrilege plan," Bratt said with some concern. Montesquieu slowly closed his eyes, and only after a long time did he open them. Those eyes did not become cloudy due to his age, instead, they emitted a wise light. They don't fail that easily. As one of the most powerful kingdoms of mankind on top of this planet, if they were to be overthrown so easily, then humanity itself should disappear from this planet. Mildred Bratt was silent for a few seconds after hearing these words, and eventually stopped speaking. Because he felt that Montesquieu was right. Even Huashu Kingdom could lose to an underground civilization, so who else would be able to withstand the doom that would only be more brutal next? Only a mountain range away from Huashu Kingdom is Brahma, the most populous country in the world today. Of course, they were watching everything that was happening in Huashu Kingdom. At the beginning of the war, the Huashu Kingdom side had once asked for their assistance, hoping that they could send a group of mutants to support them. But at that time, it was rejected outright by the higher echelons of Brahma, led by the 8 tribes. Originally, due to the special relationship between the two countries, as well as the unspoken historical origins, Huashu Kingdom did not take this to heart, and only made a secret note of it. But Brahma was quite concerned about it. Because for many years, they have been eagerly hoping to surpass Huashu Kingdom and become the most powerful kingdom in the Asian region. Therefore, this time, the invasion of the Wuluan Empire became a perfect opportunity in their eyes. Brahma alliance. At this time, the entire kingdom had long been divided, with powerful forces from all over the world cutting off, while forming a loose alliance. However, just like the 6 regions of Washu Kingdom, in the many states of Colombia, there was a top-level authority formed here by high-level mutants. The city of Muna is the source of this power structure. In the Bahovara Temple of Muna City, most of the leaders of the 8 tribes Heavenly Dragon, which represented the most powerful organization in Brahma, were gathered here today. With the exception of the Garuda, led by Gao Chang Kong, all of them were present. With the title of Emperor Indra, Brahma's most powerful man, Anand Sharma, was sitting on top of the high platform of the temple with his naked body and feet, wearing the sacred national traditional clothing, with a sturdy leg hanging down along the platform, looking as solemn as the real emperor of the divine race in the mural painting. On the 2 sides below, the leaders of the 8 tribes were also sitting cross-legged on top of the futon, as if they were all waiting for some news to arrive. From outside the divine hall, a mutant hurriedly ran over and knelt down in front of the crowd. Heavenly Emperor, we have just received the latest intelligence. The battle in Tianhai City in Huashu Kingdom has intensified. The powerhouses of the underground civilization are extremely strong. The mutants of Huashu Kingdom may not be able to support themselves. Hearing this news, pleasant smiles appeared on the faces of the 8 tribes, looking at each other and nodding their heads in satisfaction. Emperor Indra slowly opened his tightly closed eyes. Oh? I didn't expect the underground civilization to be so powerful. But this is good. As long as Huashu Kingdom has taken enough blows, they will have to cede the #1 throne in Asia. From now on, we Brahma will surpass them and become the guardian god of this region. He raised his arms high, his eyes filled with fervor and devotion amongst them. Chapter 1695 Ambitious. After Emperor Indra finished speaking these words, among the leaders of the 8 tribes below, one of them suddenly spoke up. Huashu Kingdom has endured such a blow this time, and it's likely that it will be directly destroyed. Even if it survives, it will surely be greatly wounded and unable to bear the responsibilities of an Eastern great power. He looked towards the crowd and said with great persuasion, "Now, it is time for us, Brahma, to show our strength." This person who spoke was one of the leaders of the 8 tribes Yaksha. His words were recognized by the crowd, and even Emperor Indra looked down at him. "Yaksha, what are you trying to express?" Yaksha got up and bowed at Emperor Indra before saying, "Since the fall of Huashu Kingdom is an inevitable event, there's no need for us to let them continue to occupy that huge country as well as its resources. That's why I suggest that we should take the initiative and help them take over the region that they are no longer capable of guarding." The moment these words came out, the faces of the people on the scene all became subtle. Having a powerful neighboring country next to them had never been a good thing, and surpassing Huashu Kingdom had always been a dream of their Brahma people. A look of emotion surfaced on Emperor Indra's face. "Oh? At a time like this, it's not too good for them to be fighting the underground civilization head-on while we go and do something like this, is it?" Yaksha said, "Emperor, that's not the case. The southwest of Huashu Kingdom is a very mysterious land. There is a mysterious ancient civilization buried underneath its ground, and we've sent people to explore it before, and the conclusion we got was that the underground treasures are endless as well. That is the treasure of all mankind. It cannot be allowed to be monopolized by Huashu Kingdom. Not to mention that nowadays, they are no longer capable of guarding it, so isn't it only natural for us to go over and protect the treasures of mankind?" Emperor Indra smiled after hearing these words. He nodded. "I think what Yaksha said makes perfect sense. All of this is to fulfill our Brahma's responsibility as a world power." He looked downward and addressed Yaksha and the other seated mutant. "Yaksha, Maharaja. You lead your ministries to the southwest of the Huashu Kingdom. Help them and guard the treasures of human civilization." Yaksha and Maharaja immediately bowed before Emperor Indra. "Respectfully following your orders, Heavenly Emperor." In the middle of the entire divine hall, fervor surged on the faces of almost everyone. After so many years, they finally had the opportunity to take advantage of Huashu Kingdom's weakness and stomp on it ruthlessly. It was just that amongst the crowd, there were also individuals whose faces showed a look of worry. However, facing Emperor Indra and the others, who were bent on realizing the great cause, and considering the rising national sentiments within Brahma, they obediently chose to shut up. Tianhai City. The Hades gatekeeper's move Void Destiny swept across the city, completely sweeping the center area of Tianhai City into a huge deep valley, as if it had been bombarded by the Reaper of Love. The intense storm swept into the surrounding area with Tianhai City at its center. It was a good thing that the 36 heavenly spirits were far away from the center point of the explosion, or else even a trace of this power sweeping over their bodies would have caused them to be directly blasted into flying dust on the spot. But even so, that terrifying power still made them tremble with fear. And right at this time, after the Hades gatekeeper's move of Void Destiny, he seemed to have noticed that he hadn't destroyed the mystic formation or killed the people on the ghost train. This caused a trace of doubt to arise in him. It shouldn't be like this. He had full confidence in his power, and it definitely wasn't so bad that it didn't have any effect. So his brain quickly fell into thought. The tactic they used against me was to use a mist that was able to disrupt perception to keep me from successfully leaving this area. Then using the space ability, they manipulated the train as a means of transportation to launch a surprise attack on me. This move of mine, Void Destiny, was able to instantly sweep a large area around me. From this, it can be seen that their space shuffle ability can reach a much longer distance, or they have other means that can block my attack with this move. He interlaced his arms and rested his chin on one hand. Continuing to stall with them like this will only become more and more unfavorable for me. Forget it. The Hades gatekeeper did not intend to continue wasting time. So he directly chose to close his eyes. If the eyes and senses could be deceiving, then it would be better to simply close his eyes, then he wouldn't be misled by his 5 senses. After he arbitrarily selected a direction, he did not hesitate to fly over there. In the void, the ghost train reappeared, and seeing the huge deep pit on top of the earth, Zhang Yi and the others still had palpitations at this moment. Just at this time, in the communication channel, Daishin gave them a reminder in an urgent tone. It's not good. That fellow, he seems to have found a way to escape from the 8 formation diagram. This was because in his consciousness, the monster that was trapped in the hypnosis was actually flying rapidly in a straight line towards the northwest of Tianhai City. Zhang Yi lightly laughed. Never mind, this is within expectation. The so-called maze formation was nothing more than a tricky tactic. Once the loopholes in it were discovered, it would easily become ineffective. They had already delayed the Hades gatekeeper for close to 8 minutes, and the 36 heavenly spirits had accomplished their task perfectly. But what's next? Li Changdong said anxiously. On our home turf, utilizing various setups, we were unable to gain an advantage. Once he leaves Tianhai City, what will we fight him with? He can't leave. Zhang Yi directly interrupted. Li Changdong and Zhang Daowen, who originally wanted to say something, both looked at Zhang Yi with surprised eyes at this moment. Why all of a sudden, Zhang Yi was talking so tough? Zhang Yi glanced at them and said coldly, the Hades gatekeeper, is very powerful and smart, but my people aren't just junkies either. He can see through our abilities and formations. Won't we take advantage of this time to gather information about him? It turned out that on Yang Xinxin's side, she had already gotten the results of her analysis through the intelligence agencies of the various regions. The reason why that previous shot of Reaper of Love was blocked by the Hades gatekeepers was because they used a special weapon that blocked the impact of Reaper of Love. After Li Changdong heard this, he frowned and said, so what? That only means that we can't use the Reaper of Love to kill them. No, it's not like that. Zhang Yi said to Daisheng, don't let him leave Tianhai City, otherwise, we really won't be able to win. Now, immediately catch up with him.